But here's the crazy thing, you could be one decision away from changing your life forever. That's how big this is. That's how important the choices you make today are. So, what's it going to be? Are you going to wait until it's too late? Or are you going to take that step, right now, and change everything? The clock is ticking, and you can feel it.
Hey there. Before we proceed into this incredible testimony, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Trust me, what you're about to hear might just change the way you see the world. And hey, if you've ever had a life-changing moment, drop a prayer or your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your story.
I wasn't always the person I am now. Let me introduce myself first. My name is John Mitchell. I was just an average guy, living an ordinary life, working a 9-to-5, getting by like everyone else. But one day, something happened that changed everything, something so wild, so terrifying, that it made me see the world in a completely new light. It all started on a regular Tuesday. I didn't know it would be the day that would take me far from this world and throw me into a place beyond imagination. A car accident, just a split second of inattention, and then, nothing. 1 minute, I was here, driving to work, listening to my usual music, and the next, I was gone. Or so I thought. My body was lifeless, my heart stopped beating, my breath ceased. And that's when everything changed. The first thing I noticed when I left my body wasn't some grand light or peaceful feeling like people always say. No, it wasn't peaceful at all. It was dark. The air was thick, cold, and suffocating. It felt like I was floating, but I wasn't really moving. And the silence, it was so loud, like the quietest thing you could ever imagine, but it shook me to the core. As I stood there, suspended in this strange place, I could see other people, souls, I guess, around me. They were just floating too. Some of them seemed at peace, but others? They were terrified. And I realized, with a sharp, sickening twist in my gut, that we were all there because we had crossed into a place where the choices we made during our lives had finally caught up with us. Now, I don't know if you've ever thought about what happens after you die, but let me tell you, I never imagined anything like what I saw. The first thing I understood was that there were two paths, two final destinations. One, a place of unimaginable torment. The other, a place of peace and glory. I know what you're probably thinking. What does this have to do with me? Well, let me tell you, this experience wasn't just mine. It's a warning. A warning to everyone. I saw the outcome for those who make the wrong choices. And trust me, the choices you make today, they matter. I had no idea what was coming next. My heart was racing, but I couldn't feel it. I was frozen. Then, it happened. I started to see flashes. Images. Horrifying scenes. People standing in line, one after another, eagerly receiving something I couldn't quite understand at first. Something that looked so wrong. And then, a voice, loud, but distant, whispered, "They chose." And just like that, I understood. I had to know more. What was this thing that I was seeing? And why were these souls so eager to take it? I can't explain what it was like to feel the weight of those words. They chose. That's when I realized, the choice was simple. It was life or death. And the choice would determine everything. And that's when the real horror began. But I can't tell you yet what happened. You have to know this. What I'm about to tell you isn't just some story, it's a warning. What happened to me is what could happen to you. So stick with me. because I'm about to reveal something that might just change how you look at everything, especially your future. Now, you've probably heard people talk about the mark of the beast. You've heard about it, seen it in movies, maybe even read about it in the Bible. But what does it really mean? What happens to you if you take it? This is where the real danger starts. And trust me, you don't want to miss this. The mark of the beast, a sinister choice. When I was pulled into that place, after I left my body, it was like I was shown everything, but I didn't understand it all at first. All I saw were these lines of people, normal, everyday people, lined up like they were waiting for something. It was unsettling. And it wasn't like they were being forced, no. They were choosing. They were willingly stepping up to get marked. At first, I couldn't figure out what the mark was. But then, I saw it. The symbol. It was burned into their skin. Right there on their foreheads, on their hands. The number 666. I couldn't escape it. It was there, on everyone. Now, let me ask you, have you ever felt a pull, something deep inside, telling you to do something you knew was wrong, but you did it anyway? What if that feeling didn't come from inside you, but from the world? What if everyone around you told you that this was the only choice you had to survive? How far would you go to protect yourself, your family, your life? These people, they made their choice. But here's the thing, they didn't just choose a number. No, it was so much bigger. They were choosing a side. And the side they chose? It wasn't God's. The moment I saw the mark, something in me went cold. I could feel the evil oozing out of it. And that's when it hit me, this was the mark of the beast. The Antichrist. The one who had taken control of the world, telling everyone they couldn't buy or sell, couldn't survive without submitting to him. It was a choice, all right. But it was a choice with a terrifying cost. So, what does it really mean to take this mark? And more importantly, what happens if you refuse? Stick with me here, because what I saw next will haunt you. I could feel it, the weight in the air, the oppressive feeling that something terrible was happening. When I looked at the people standing in that line, it hit me like a ton of bricks. They were waiting for the mark. You know the one. The mark of the beast. The one everyone talks about. But this was no longer some far-off story. It was real. I was seeing it unfold right before my eyes, and the fear that crawled up my spine was unlike anything I had ever felt. I could hear their whispers, their excitement. "This is the only way to survive," one man said, his voice shaky with desperation. Another woman muttered, "If I don't take it, I'll lose everything. My family, my life, everything I've worked for." And I understood. I felt it too. The pressure. The overwhelming desire to protect everything you love. It's a choice, right? A simple choice to take the mark and live. But what does that really mean? What are you choosing when you take it? The people in front of me didn't look like evil monsters or twisted figures. They were like anyone you know. Regular people. And yet, the moment that mark touched their skin, something in their eyes changed. It was as if a piece of their soul vanished. It was a quiet, subtle thing, but it was there. Something was lost the moment they chose it. Now, ask yourself, what would you do? If it was you, standing there, knowing your family might starve, knowing you might not be able to buy anything, knowing the world was turning against you, would you take it? Would you take the mark to survive? Let me tell you, I watched people do it. They raised their hands, and the mark was burned into their foreheads, their hands, without hesitation. And it wasn't just a physical mark. It was a spiritual one too. And that's the worst part. You might think, hey, it's just a number, right? 666, no big deal. But trust me, it's so much more. The moment that mark is on you, your soul is tied to something much darker than anything you can imagine. But there were others, those who refused. And I saw them too. They stood apart, watching in horror as the people they knew, the people they loved, made their choice. And here's where it gets truly terrifying. The moment someone refused, something happened. It wasn't like they were left alone. No. The world turned against them. They couldn't buy food. They couldn't sell anything. Everything became a battle. And it wasn't just survival anymore, it was a war for their soul. I could feel it in my chest. I could feel the pain and the desperation of those who refused the mark. They weren't just fighting to survive, they were fighting for something much bigger. They were fighting for their freedom, their chance to stand before God. But that fight wasn't easy. In fact, it was the hardest thing anyone could face. And that's the part that haunted me. The fear. The fear of what happens when you refuse. Because the choice to take the mark seems so easy, right? But the price you pay for it? That's the part nobody tells you about. But the most terrifying part of all was when I saw those who took the mark and the ones who didn't, together. It was like the two worlds collided. And let me tell you, if you've ever had that feeling like something is closing in around you, something you can't escape, you'll understand what I felt in that moment. But before I go on, I need to ask you something. Do you really know what you're risking? I mean, do you truly understand what it means to refuse? Because that decision will cost you everything. Not just your money, not just your comfort. It's going to cost you everything. Stay with me. I have to show you what happens next. Because when you see it, you'll never look at the world, or your choices, the same way again. Just remember, there are two paths. And you can't go back once you've made your choice. So, are you ready to find out what happens when you refuse? When you stand against everything the world is telling you to do? When you choose something that might seem impossible, but in the end, is the only way to truly survive? Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. The fate of those who accept the mark. I have to tell you, what I saw next was beyond anything I could ever have imagined. The people who took the mark, those who raised their hands without hesitation, there was something that happened to them, something that can't be described by words alone. At first, it seemed normal. The mark was just a symbol, right? But the moment it was placed on their skin, everything changed. It wasn't a physical change, not at first. No, it was something much deeper than that. It was like a piece of their humanity was drained away, and in its place, something else took root. I could see it in their eyes. I could feel it in the air. The moment they accepted it, they became different. They looked the same, walked the same, but they weren't the same. You might be thinking, what's the big deal? People are doing it every day. They're fine. But let me ask you this, are they really fine? Are they really? Because the moment they took that mark, they lost something so precious, something they can never get back. I saw one man, he had a family, a wife, 2 kids, and he took the mark thinking it would protect them. He was so sure it was the right choice. But as soon as it was on him, I saw his wife look at him with a look of fear. Not the fear of someone who was scared of him, but the fear of someone who realized they had lost him. That's the thing, isn't it? The moment you take that mark, you don't just lose your soul. You lose the ability to connect with those who refused it. It's like a barrier that's put between you and them. And then, the worst part. I saw them all, the ones who had accepted the mark, walking into this place. I can't even call it a place. It was like a shadow of everything they had ever hoped for. A twisted version of life. Everything was dark, cold, and empty. Their eyes were glazed over, like they were just walking zombies, lost in a world that no longer cared for them. But the worst thing wasn't even the emptiness. No, it was the voices. I heard the voices of those who had taken the mark, whispering in agony, in regret. They wished they had never made that choice. They begged to go back, to change their minds, but it was too late. There was no going back for them. Can you imagine that feeling? Knowing, deep down in your heart, that you had sealed your fate forever? That you could never change your mind, never take it back? That's what happened to them. They were trapped. And that was the moment when it truly hit me. Taking the mark wasn't just a choice between life and death, it was a choice between eternal regret and eternal damnation. But here's the thing. The more I watched them, the more I saw how the world had lied to them. They thought they were securing their survival, but what they were really doing was securing their misery. They were trapped in a cycle they could never escape from. Every single day, it was the same: hopelessness, regret, pain. And all they had to do was look back and realize they could have chosen differently. But it was too late. Let me ask you this: are you ready to make that choice? Are you ready to risk everything for a life that promises nothing but regret? But here's the real question that kept echoing in my mind as I watched them. What if you knew the truth? What if you knew the price of the mark? What if you understood that accepting it isn't just about survival for a little while, it's about losing your soul forever? I don't want to scare you, but I need you to understand something. It's easy to think that the mark is just some number, just a little symbol. But it's not. It's the mark of a force so dark, so evil, that it will strip you of everything you are. You will lose your connection to everything good in the world. And you will never get it back. Stay with me. Because I need to show you what happens next. What happens to the ones who refuse. Because when you see the other side of this decision, when you see what awaits those who stand firm, you will understand that there's more to this story than you could ever imagine. But the question still stands: what will you choose? The struggle of those who refuse the mark. I know you're probably wondering, why would anyone refuse the mark? It seems like the only way to survive. But here's the truth: they had no idea what was coming. They thought they could just walk away. They thought they could keep their faith and stay safe. But that's not how it works. Not in this world. I remember seeing them, those who refused the mark, standing there, holding on to what they believed was right, thinking they were doing the right thing. But what I saw next, it shook me to my core. The world didn't just let them walk away. It didn't take long for the pressure to start. The threats came fast and hard. They were given an ultimatum: accept the mark or suffer. And the suffering began almost immediately. No food. No shelter. No protection. I saw one woman, her face pale, her hands shaking. She had refused to take the mark, and it was like the world turned against her. She had 2 kids, and they were hungry. So hungry. They searched for food, but nothing could save them. It wasn't that there was no food, it was that everything they found was marked. Every single thing. I'm telling you, it was like a nightmare. They couldn't even find a place to sleep safely. Everywhere they turned, there were eyes watching, waiting to see if they would crack. But no matter how hard it got, she held her ground. She refused. Can you imagine being in that position? Knowing your children are hungry, knowing you're powerless, but still holding on to your belief? Could you do that? Could you withstand the pressure, the pain, the fear? And the worst part? It didn't stop there. The authorities, those who enforced the system, they weren't just threats. No. They were more like shadows, always lurking, always ready to pounce. They didn't just threaten with force. They threatened with your very identity. Without the mark, you became invisible. A non-person. That's what they called it. You weren't even human anymore in their eyes. And no matter how hard you tried, no matter how much you begged for mercy, the world just didn't care. I watched a man, a strong man with a deep voice, a man who had once been a leader in his community, break down in front of me. He hadn't eaten in days. He was starving. And yet, he still said, "I will never take it. I'd rather die." But you could see it in his eyes. He didn't want to die. He didn't want to watch his family suffer. And the worst part was that there was no escape. No way out. The walls kept closing in, and I could see him breaking bit by bit. His strength wasn't enough to carry him through anymore. And you know what? It started to make me wonder, how long could you last? How long could you keep saying no before everything you believed in was tested, pushed to the limit? The longer I watched them, the more I realized the kind of toll this struggle took on their spirits. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about how much they were willing to sacrifice for what they believed in. Could they endure? Could they keep fighting? And that's the thing. They weren't just fighting against the world, they were fighting against themselves. The more the world pushed back, the more they had to question, am I doing the right thing? How far will I go before I break? That's the real question, isn't it? How far would you go? The pressure didn't stop. And for some, it was the weight of the world that crushed them. I saw people begin to fold. I saw them accept the mark. Not because they wanted to, but because they couldn't take it anymore. How could they? But those who held on, who refused to bow to the pressure, they became something else. They became symbols. They were the ones who kept their dignity intact, their faith unbroken. But the road wasn't easy. The question I kept asking myself was this: could I have done it? Could I have endured the hunger, the pain, the rejection? Could I have stayed strong? I'll tell you what I saw next, though, something that you won't believe. Something that could change everything for you. So stay with me, because what happens after this will make you question everything you thought you knew. The resurrection of the faithful. I have to tell you this part, because what happened next is something no one could have prepared for. After everything, the suffering, the choices, the struggles, there was something that came next, something no one expected. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about something bigger. You see, as those who refused the mark faced unimaginable pain, something began to change. I saw it, right before my eyes. It started small, just a flicker. But then, it grew. It was like a spark in the darkness. It was hope. I know that sounds strange, but bear with me for a second. The people who had suffered, who had stood strong in their faith, even when it seemed like the world was against them, they started to rise. I remember a woman, so tired, so weak from days without food. But when the moment came, When everything seemed lost, she stood. She looked up, as though something was calling her, something she couldn't see but felt. And then, she took a step. And another. And another. It was like she was being lifted up from all the weight that had been pressing down on her. And then something truly unbelievable happened. As more and more of the faithful began to stand, to rise, the air around them changed. It wasn't like anything I've ever felt before. It was calm. It was peaceful. It was as if the world had paused for a second, just to let them breathe. But that's not even the crazy part. No, the truly wild part was what happened next. I watched in awe as one by one, those who had held onto their faith, who had been rejected, persecuted, left behind, they were transformed. It was like their bodies became whole again, like every mark, every scar, every wound, physical or emotional, just vanished. They weren't just healed. They were renewed. Stronger than ever. Healthier than ever. You could see it in their eyes. They were different. They were glowing. And I know what you're thinking right now. That sounds impossible. This is a dream. This can't be real. But it wasn't a dream. It wasn't a fantasy. This was happening right in front of me. Can you picture it? Can you imagine what it must have been like to feel that kind of power? The kind that makes every tear you've shed, every ounce of pain you've felt, just melt away? It wasn't just physical healing. It was like their spirits were being restored too. Their purpose, their strength, it was like it was all reborn in that moment. And you want to know the craziest part? The more I watched, the more I realized something huge. This wasn't just happening by chance. There was a force at play. A power beyond us. And it wasn't just about them finding strength within themselves. Something bigger, something divine, was lifting them up. Now, I know you might be wondering, what about those who didn't stand firm? What about the ones who chose the mark? The truth? They didn't get to experience this. Not like those who refused. But what happened to the faithful wasn't just about them. It was a sign. A sign that this wasn't the end, that something greater was at work. It was the start of something new. And trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. I'm about to tell you something that will change everything you thought you knew. Something that might just make you rethink everything. Stay with me. The next part? You won't believe it. The final judgment, the great white throne. I can't even begin to tell you how it felt when I found myself standing there. It was beyond anything I could have imagined. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't a vision. I was there, standing before the great white throne. And let me tell you, this wasn't like anything you've ever seen or heard about before. The air itself was heavy with the kind of stillness you only feel when something huge is about to happen. It was almost like time stopped. I could feel the weight of it, the weight of all that had led up to this moment. And everything was about to change. Can you picture it? A throne so bright it felt like it could melt your eyes. Not just a throne, though. This was the seat of judgment. The place where every soul who ever lived would stand before the ultimate decision. I was standing there, but I wasn't alone. Around me, people were gathering. So many people. All sorts of faces, all sorts of expressions, some full of fear, some full of hope. But all of them, every single one, knowing that something big was coming. I remember looking up, just staring, feeling like the ground beneath me was trembling. And then, from the throne, came a voice. It wasn't loud, but it boomed. It felt like it came from deep within, shaking the very core of everything. And the words? They were clear. They were final. You stand before the judgment of all that has been. The choice you made, the path you walked, will now be revealed. As I heard those words, my heart started to race. You could feel the weight of the moment, the tension building up like a storm about to break. How would it go for me? How would it go for everyone else? Who was going to stand tall and who was going to fall? One by one, people were called forward. Each person, their whole life flashed before them. Every action, every thought, every choice, they couldn't hide. The things we kept secret, the things we hoped no one would ever know, they were all laid bare in that moment. You could see it in their faces as the truth hit them, as they realized they had nowhere to hide. It was terrifying. But also, there was hope. But then, the hardest part came. It wasn't about what you did. No, it wasn't about the mistakes you made or the things you wish you hadn't done. It was about who you stood with. It was about whether you chose the mark, whether you chose to follow what the world told you, or whether you stood strong and said no. I watched as some who had chosen the mark were pulled away. It wasn't a punishment, not in the way you might think. It was like they were being removed from something bigger, something beautiful. I couldn't explain it, but the feeling of loss was real. And then, others, the faithful, the ones who had refused, who had fought to hold on to their beliefs no matter what, they were welcomed. They were welcomed with open arms, like they had been waiting for this moment their entire lives. I know what you're thinking. What happened next? What does it mean? Well, what happened next was unlike anything I could have ever imagined. It was a moment where every single soul understood the judgment wasn't over yet. No, it wasn't just a decision. It was a beginning. Can you imagine the weight of that? The choice you make now, the steps you take today, they're going to mean something. Every action, every decision, it matters. And you're standing at the edge of something huge, something you can't turn away from. Will you be among the faithful? Or will you make a choice that takes you down a different road? This moment? It's coming. And it's closer than you think. Stay with me, because what happens next, what you need to understand, is more than just judgment. It's about your place in what's to come. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. The warning. I know what you're thinking right now. What happens next? What's the warning? Let me tell you, I didn't realize how serious it all was until it was almost too late. And the warning? It's not some distant thought you can ignore. No, this is something that could affect you right now, today. It's real. You see, standing before the judgment, I realized something that no one ever tells you. We all think we have time, right? We all think we can put things off, delay the big decisions. But when I was there, looking around, seeing the choices others had made, I understood something that changed everything. Time is short. The path you walk today will take you somewhere, and it's not always easy to see where it's leading. The choices you make right now, whether you think they're big or small, are adding up. What's wild is, none of us are promised tomorrow. You might think you're okay, that the time to act isn't right now. But trust me, you don't want to wait. The chance to make the right choice? It's slipping away, and once it's gone, it's gone. You don't want to be like the people who waited too long. You don't want to be in that place where it's too late to change anything. Think about it, when it comes time for judgment, there are no second chances. No takebacks. No rewrites. What you do now matters. I want you to think about something. If you stood before the throne today, right now, what would your choices say about you? What would you be asked? And would you be ready to face the truth of your life? The warning is simple: don't wait. Make the choice to walk in truth today, because tomorrow might not be there for you. Don't think for a second that you can keep putting things off. The choice to follow the right path is always there, right in front of you. But you have to make the decision. Let me ask you this: how long are you going to keep waiting for the perfect time? What if the time is now? What if you don't have tomorrow? Stay with me, because coming up next, the closing scene is going to hit harder than anything you've heard yet. You'll want to be there, because the moment of truth is coming for all of us. And trust me, you don't want to miss what's next. You need to hear this. Are you ready? Alright, here we are, the moment you've been waiting for. The end of the story, but in many ways, it's also the beginning. And I need you to listen closely. This is the part that will stick with you forever. After everything that happened, the judgment, the feeling of knowing there's no turning back, I was taken back to where it all started. The world I knew. But it wasn't the same. Things felt different. I was given a second chance. You know, we all hear about second chances, but when you're standing there, looking at the reality of what's ahead, you really start to understand just how important that second chance is. So, what did I do with it? I'll tell you this: I didn't waste a second. And neither should you. The world you're living in right now? It's fragile. Every decision you make today could change everything tomorrow. I learned that the hard way. Now, you might be asking yourself, how do I make the right choice? How do I know I'm on the right path? I wish I had the perfect answer for you. But here's what I do know: you know. Deep down, you know. You can feel it in your gut when you're heading the wrong way. It's that little voice, that feeling you get when something doesn't sit right. That's your chance to change, to stop and turn things around before it's too late. And don't think you're the only one who feels it. Everyone has that choice, right in front of them. And here's the crazy thing: you could be one decision away from changing your life forever. That's how big this is. That's how important the choices you make today are. So, what's it going to be? Are you going to wait until it's too late? Or are you going to take that step, right now, and change everything? The clock is ticking, and you can feel it. But here's the thing: you don't have to face it alone. There's help. There's a way out of the darkness. The choice is yours. And that's the real power: you decide. So, take a moment. Think about where you are right now. Think about what's ahead. And remember this: the end is never really the end. It's only the start of something new. A new chance. A new beginning. And you are in control of it. Make the choice that will change everything. And trust me, it's never too late to start again.
Wow, that was intense, wasn't it? If this story made you think or feel something deep inside, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. And remember, your thoughts matter to us. Take a moment to leave a prayer or a comment below. Let's start a conversation. Stay tuned for more and take care of your soul. This journey doesn't end here.